All right, so this is our shading worksheet. The other day we did the gradated scale, the gradated value scale right here. If anybody missed that, that demonstration is on Canvas, so you can watch that demonstration. But today I'm going to demonstrate how to do the sphere down here at the bottom. So what you guys are going to be doing is you're going to be taking this circle. So this is a shape, it's two-dimensional, and we're going to make it look like a sphere, which is three-dimensional, using value. Okay? So this is just what it looks like. Done right here. And I'll have that also too up on the board so you guys can see it when you're finished. One of the things, and it can kind of be hard too on your copy, but one of the things that a lot of kids have a hard time doing, I'd say probably the hardest thing on this, is just when you shade, you want to kind of wrap your marks around the form to make it feel more round. So it would be like if you took like a striped blanket and put it around a basketball. How would those stripes curve around that ball? Okay, so if you put a striped blanket over a ball, how would those stripes wrap around it? That's sort of the motion or the movement that you want to make when you're shading the something like this. Okay, so you always want to follow the form. So we won't be necessarily working with it with straight lines, so we're going to be kind of curving that stuff. At times I do that though, so I'll go back. I usually go back and forth. The other thing too that I find a lot of kids have a hard time with is if you guys look, and it's kind of hard to see. Let me see here. Put this. Is right here at the very bottom. This is where you call sort of a kind of a cast highlight. So what happens, and you can see with my son that I have here, I've drawn these lines so that you can see where the light hits the ball. And then what happens is, and as you guys probably learned in science class, light is reflective. So what happens is that when light hits something, it will bounce off. When you're talking about a sphere, it will bounce off and it will hit right here on the underside. So you're going to go from lightest, which is white, to a little bit darker, darkest, and then highlight, and then you'll have your cast shadow under here. We're going to do the cast shadow last, okay? So, I'm going to put this one away. Make sure you have your scrap piece of paper handy. So you'll need that to kind of prep your pencil. Try to put these so that they're kind of in the frame all together. Okay? All right, so the first thing I want you guys to do, make sure you got your pencils in your hands. And if you don't have your scrap paper from Friday, you can go ahead and grab another piece of paper, but try to keep those. We want to reuse the paper, so we don't want to waste a lot of paper. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 4H pencil, and again, you can see I probably sharpened it too sharp. So first thing we want to do is we want to create a nice edge to shade with. So again, you don't want to have, when you use it, you don't want it to be all liney like that. So you want to kind of sand down the edge so you get kind of this look right here. Nice, smooth, and flat. And that takes a little while to establish with the 4H pencil just because it's a harder lead. So the first thing I'm going to do, I am going to kind of draw where I want that secondary highlight to be. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than what I need it to be. Okay, so I'm going to draw where I want that. And I'm going to try my best to not shade in that area, which can be hard. So I'm going to leave that white. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to start very lightly with my 4H, and I'm just going to kind of pull it up around the sides. And I'm starting very lightly, as you can see. It's probably hard to see on the screen. And again, I'm just kind of wrapping these lines around. So kind of imagine that this is a striped blanket that you're kind of wrapping around a basketball. How would those lines look? What direction would they be going in? This is going to be. Now, I do like moving my paper around a lot. So you don't have to keep your paper, you know, just straight. Move it around. Now you do want to be careful though, guys, when you do this, that if you end up putting your hand on top of this gradated scale, you're probably going to smudge all that. So another little trick is to take that scrap paper and actually put it right on top of that gradated scale so you don't smudge it out. So a lot of times when I'm doing a pencil drawing where I'm shading, I will have two scrap pieces of paper with me, one to cover up and protect the work that I've already done so I don't smear it with my arm, and then another to use to just prep my pencils. So I'm constantly moving my paper. And you're just going to pull it up around the sides. I'm going to have a very, very light hand when I do this so that I can get those barely there values and I can transition from white to my grays easier. So what I do is I basically work with the 4H until I'm ready or need to go darker, and the 4H just won't do that for me anymore. But I will work with that until it sort of stops working for me. But it also, too, the nice thing about starting with the 4H is that even in these darker areas, if I mess up with the 4H, I'll probably get covered up with my darker pencils, and it just gives me a chance to kind of get my feet wet and just kind of get used to what I'm doing. Now, if it helps, one other thing you can do, too, is you can draw those arrows so you can see where the light's going to hit, and that's where you want to stay away from. All right, so once I get a good layer of that 4H on there and it's smooth, you know, and again, I'm going to try to address any patchiness that I see. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to my 3B pencil. So again, before I start, I always give myself a nice edge to shade with. And you will notice that the B pencils, you can get a good edge to shade with a lot quicker than with the 4H pencil. I'm going to start down here sort of at the bottom where I know it's going to be darker, and I'm just going to kind of drag it up and lighten up my pressure as I move towards those lighter values. So again, remember, it's just as much about the pressure you're using as is the amount of layers. So you can make something darker by just adding more on top, but you can also make things darker by adding more pressure. So a lot of times in this kind of stage, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I need to do. I don't necessarily know what I need to do. So I just kind of take my time by building up these light layers. That way I can kind of assess what I need better that way. And then when I start feeling more confident about what decisions I need to make on what I need to do, then I'll put more pressure down. Now again, these are some of the things that artists practice all the time. So on those days where they might not feel very creative, or maybe they're just having an artist block, this is some of the stuff that they do is they'll just go back to the fundamentals. They'll practice shading, they'll practice line work, they'll sketch things that are sitting in their studios. So I'm just going to continue to build up. And again, I pull it up along the sides too. I've kind of got my drawing upside down so you can show you. And again, I'm just like very lightly touching my paper here. So this helps me kind of blend. Again, remember when we're blending, we do not use our finger or a tissue to kind of blend or smudge out our graphite. You do that, it's just going to look like what my husband likes to refer to as a hot mess. So do not do that. Use the pencils to blend. You'll keep the structure of your shading intact that way. And again, once I feel really confident about what I'm doing, and I need to erase out this highlight just a little bit more. I've covered it up a bit. Pencil eraser does help out a lot, guys, for these little areas that you need to pull back out. So. And then when I'm feeling more confident about the value, again, I'm going to press harder. Start building up those dark values. Now you've got that reference up here right above that. Now, of course, it has been Xerox copied off, so it's not perfect, but it will serve, it will help you. Funny, I always get to a stage 2 with things like this where I'm like, ooh, that doesn't look like it's working. So I'm constantly like going back and forth. I feel like sort of art is just a gigantic process of fixing, and that's all that I'm doing is just fixing. And I'm just kind of doing what I call like the karate move where it's the wax on, wax off part. So I'm just kind of doing these little circles when I'm sheeting, which I do find that helps kind of blend stuff out. So if you're looking for just a way to use your pencil, you can think about that. Now our goal here is, guys, is that when we're doing this, we don't get that beach ball look. So we don't want it to look striped or anything like that. So the goal is to have these values gradate and transition into each other. Now, a lot of times I find, too, if I take my time, I'm doing a lot less erasing throughout the process. All right, so that's my 3B. Now I'm going to go with my 6B. I'm going to start by just, again, giving myself a nice edge to shade with. And I want to get this right here at the bottom really dark. And whenever I want to kind of blend it out, I'm lightening up my pressure. But when I'm ready to kind of make it dark, then I need to really push down on the pressure. This is also too the time where I can kind of cut into that sort of cast highlight that I have here. I can make it a little bit smaller now if I'm ready to do that. So again, I'm just constantly moving my paper around. I find it's just easier. My hand, I feel comfortable with it working just from one direction, so. I'm even using my 6B up here and even and some of this lighter stuff. I mean, again, you can get a lot of values out of one pencil just by varying the amount of pressure you have on it. And then I always like to go back through with my 4H pencil. Like my 4H pencil I find is a really great tool for blending. Much better than using my finger or a piece of tissue paper or something like that. So I'll even go back over with my 4H even throughout all these darker areas, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of pulls everything together, I feel like. And I always find that I need to pull up some of this gray a little bit more, so I'm going to pull that up. Now I'm going to sharpen up my 6B right here just for the bottom. Let that kind of sharpen. I'm just going to kind of clean up this edge for the highlight. Okay, I'm going to still mess around with that, but I think I'm good with that for now. All right, so now let's talk about the cast shadow, okay? Now this is something that your example up here at the top does not show very well because it's been Xeroxed, so you just don't have as good of a copy right there. But I'll show you this finished one. So when you look at this, what you should notice is that a cast shadow is always darkest where? Where would a cast shadow be its darkest? Where do you think? Who wants to take a guess? Exactly. So the cast shadow is always its darkest, the closest to the object, okay? A lot of times people make the mistake of they think if it's a cash shadow, they just want to shade it in all black, okay? That's not the case. It will have variation in it, okay? So it's always going to be darker here towards the sphere or the object, regardless of what object we're talking about. So it's going to be darkest here, closest to the sphere, and then it's going to lighten up as it comes out here to the outside. So what I'm going to do, because it's a cast shadow, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just start with the 3B because I know I'm not going to have any light grays in there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the 3B, and because this is a flat surface, or we're trying to make it look flat, I'm not going to be using those little circles that I used for the sphere. So when I do this, I am just going to very lightly, I'm just going to kind of go side to side. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to mimic the form that I'm shading. And because this is, again, flat, I'm going to use a lot of straight lines here to make it appear flat. Now you have to be really careful that you don't go in and shade in that over top the sphere. So you have to have a lot of control over your pencil. So I'm just going to put a light layer of 3B down. And then again, I'm going to build it up so it looks like it's getting darker towards the sphere. So once I get that light layer, I'm probably not going to touch this end up anymore. We'll see. I don't know yet. So once I finish up with my 3B, and I think I've used it as much as I possibly can, then my next step is to go in with my 6B and then really make it dark right underneath here. And that's what's going to ground that sphere on top of its cast shadow. So it's going to make it look like it's sitting right there. Okay, so make that really, really dark right next to where the sphere is. Now that we have our cast shadow on there, now that I've left that cast highlight right underneath there white, it's too light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 4H pencil and I'm just going to go over it with just a very thin layer of 4H just to quiet it down a little bit. I don't want to get rid of it, I just want to make it quiet. And then after I'm done with that, all I've got is just like touch-ups to make. One of the things I find I tend to do a lot is just right here where I have my lightest value with the pencil and then white. I always have like a little edge right there. So again, that's something I use that kneaded eraser for. And I'll just kind of tap on top of that edge. And that just helps me kind of blend that out a little bit more. And remember, with a kneaded eraser, you don't go side to side or swipe it. You gotta kind of pull on top or tap it on top of that area. And then the rest of the time is just to kind of tidy this up. You know, find any patches you need to dress, fill in areas, make stuff darker. I will tell you that a lot of the stuff I mark off for on this particular section is stripes. So if I see stripes or areas that are not blended out, that gets marked off. And then if it's not dark enough where it needs to be. So I'd say those are probably the most common things that get marked off. Okay, so that's the end of the demo. The rest of the time is for you guys to tidy these things up and get them ready to turn in.